tweet at Smooth901FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981.
So let's start with our first story. Our first story is from the Vanguard newspaper. It's breaking news. Well, it's no longer breaking because a lot of people have heard already. INEC, Independent National Electoral Commission, has announced the All Progressives Congress APC presidential candidate winner. That's the incumbent president, Muhammadu Buhari, as the winner of the 2019 presidential election today, early hours of this morning. They said he had polled about 15 million votes against his strongest opponent, Atiku, who polled 11 million votes. Well, take us through the story, Divo.
Well, I think it's clear and in public. If readers, the audience looks through the papers, you'll get the breakdown across the country. Remember, last weekend we had the elections for the presidential and the National Assembly members. Now, as always with every election, there's the victor and there is the vanquished. But we hope that the graciousness that comes with every victory will be extended this time round. However, the president comes into a nation that is highly polarized. If you look at the figures across the nation, both in the north, south, and east, the margins of victory, especially in places where the opposition was strong, was not so large. So that shows you the mind of the people if we go by the figures.
Devo, doesn't that work for the other side as well?
No, same thing.
Exactly.
Same thing.
So we can't actually, that actually doesn't tell you anything per se.
My point
because
is the
if you go to the north,
state of
PDP rule didn't
yes, my
do
point
very
is the
well.
polarized state of the country. Prior to this election, the campaigns were hot, the campaigns were heated, much was being said, both physically and across the social media. What we see that there were so many issues that came with the election itself, from the cancellation to the postponement, and even when the election took place, the issues of low voter turnout in terms of card reader, card reader discrepancies, even in the collation, the slow speed. But we are looking forward to see whether this second tenure of the presidency can bring about the needed democratic changes that we have been looking for. Finally, I would like to say that the opposition, even though they had lost going by the announcement by INEC, it's in their rights to take up their disputes with the election in terms of the discrepancies they raised in terms of the PVC, the rejected votes, the invalid votes, which are a source of concern for many.
Yes.
Now, we hope that the electoral body and the court are ready to be able to expedite the review of some of these petitions, so that at the end of the day, remember, it's still a democracy, even though the president-elect has been announced. If the courts do find reasons to be able to turn it over, then we expect the rule of law and justice to take place.
So turn what over, or just deliberate on the issues that are being raised?
No, I'm saying at the end of the day, it can go either way,
Either
through.
way. Okay,
Yeah.
based on decision. Thank
Okay,
you.
can we come back on that now?
We need to move on to the next story. Our next story is from the Vanguard newspaper. We have this headline: KADUNA, policeman, 28 others killed in fresh Kajuru attack and houses razed. This is a reprisal attack according to reports. Reprisal on the attack that happened 2 weeks ago in Kaduna State. We recall that the governor, Nasser El-Rufai, was calling for the federal government's intervention on that. So there was conflicting figures reported by the governor and then contradicted by the police. But then this is not abated yet, because now the attacks just happened last night. Said no fewer than 29 persons, including a policeman, were killed yesterday when gunmen suspected to be herdsmen at communities in Kajuru and Kachia local government areas of Kaduna State. But take us through the story, Adedunmade.
Yes, sadly, a number of people have lost their lives again in herdsmen attacks, which we find very, very appalling, really, at this time, because this is something that we've continued to discuss for months in and out, and there's actually no week or no 2 weeks in which we don't discuss something about a herdsman attack or attack by unknown gunmen. It's actually very sad that this has continued to happen. Like I said, now according to the report here, the attacks came very early in the morning. They said armed men that numbered about 400 attacked the village, and they burned houses, they killed people. And there's another quote from this story that says that basically the whole village was destroyed. And I just want to ask Nigerians one thing. Why is it that we are always very reactionary? Because now the state governor has said, oh yes, he's saddened, we are all saddened. And the police and the military, when they got there, though they were able to go there in quick time, but the only thing they were able to do when they got there was recover the bodies. Now there's no one that is saying anything about actually going after these people. How do 400 people just magically disappear? You know, and you cannot prosecute them, you cannot arrest them, and it's a continuing thing. Now there's this thing now that says that there's this allegation, sorry, that says that these are herdsmen. Herdsmen don't just disappear, they are always with their cattle, they always know where they can be found.
Thank you.
So I just want to believe that maybe the governor does not have the political will to actually secure the lives and safety of property in his state, and I feel he is the one that should be directly indicted in this statement, because of course the blame must lie with the leadership. Now El Rufai himself has not really been a stellar person in regards to the statements that he has made in regard to trying to resolve the issues, especially the violent issues that have happened in his state. In fact, sometimes it has been alleged that he has been the one to infuriate most of this, or some of this.
He's been partisan.
He's been partisan.
So could it be based on partisan reasons that you say, oh, that's the reason why this is handled carelessly? Because barely 2 weeks ago this same attack happened, and then couldn't they have anticipated that they should secure the area and make sure that people are safe?
You see, the
instead of focusing on elections and being distracted by electionary campaigns.
The truth is this: the police cannot handle it. The military cannot handle it. You see, as Nigerians, we have to begin to ask ourselves the real questions. If our security agencies cannot handle these things, then maybe in all these places, maybe the local assembly, the state house of assembly have to come together and sit down and start to think about how the people can protect themselves. Because we're always saying the people should not protect themselves. The people should not protect themselves. So should they just continue to be killed?
Adedunmade, that's a risky suggestion to make, because if you say the police cannot wait, hang on, I'm getting somewhere. If you say the security agencies cannot handle, and then you leave it to the people, that is tantamount to chaos.
Yes, but we've always known that where constituted authority fails in its duties, then self-help is the only resort.
Well, shouldn't the necessary call right now be first let the people who have the responsibility of securing lives and property be
called?
Let me land. Shouldn't they be held accountable? Shouldn't they receive consequences for this, for their inactions?
You're right, Val, but unfortunately, the KADUNA crisis is decades old. It didn't start with El Rufai, and it's unfortunate that the federal government, administration after administration, has failed to wade into the internal ethno-religious differences that have been taking place between Kaduna North and Kaduna South. Even take a look at the election votes. You could tell the division that took place in that. You remember just before now, El Rufai raised the issue of a number of people killed, and people were saying, oh, that if it was the flip side, yes, if it was the flip side, if you remember some time ago, the same thing happened. So we obviously have a flashpoint within Kaduna, and until there is objective reasoning waded into that crisis, you will always see a reoccurrence. It's not going to end.
All right, Devo, I'll come to you. I'll stick with you for this next story. Thank you, Adedunmade, for that last analysis. This news story is from the New Telegraph. It's not just new because it happened 3 days ago, where one... I don't even know how to phrase this, because he's a drunk returning officer, and he was deployed to an area. It happens to be a university professor or university lecturer who was given the responsibility of being a returning officer for the Independent National Electoral Commission for the exercise that's happening right now, the elections. And then he appeared at his polling unit drunk and completely disheveled and not able to comprehend what he was supposed to do. And then another man, Mr. Salihu Adamu Musa, an INEC electoral officer in Bokos local government area, Plateau State, was asked to replace him, and he's apologizing over the shameful behavior of his colleague. Well, take us through this story, Devo.
No, basically, there are two things I want to capture from this story. One, INEC's apology, which I'll give the list of all the other apologies that they should be doing. And in this case, in Plateau State, where Bear seemed to have taken the day in the electoral officer's books, and at the end of the day, he actually showed up drunk and all started sleeping off until he was replaced. So obviously the people were enraged, but the fact that the replacement actually apologized on this behalf, I think it calmed down the nerves.
Well, it's very important that you mention why they were enraged, because as stipulated by law, an electoral or a returning officer is not supposed to replace a collation officer without necessary steps taken before the election starts.
Yes, but I think that was the, how do I call it, the short gap approach to ensure that the election went
Goes
on.
on, okay.
Yes, and it didn't lead to any breakdown of law and order.
Mm.
Now, in terms of apologies and INEC, INEC, yes, is an agency of government. However, I'm sure within the following weeks coming, all and sundry will begin to give the reviews in terms of how this election went.
Mm.
But I think in terms of apologies, where INEC should be looking at, starting with based on logistics and operations, how well did they fare in terms of this? And I think there were some gaps and defaults in terms of their ability to deliver. Even when they pushed it by 1 week, we knew that it still wasn't going to be enough. That's why we saw a lot of the issues. Guidelines and procedures. Was there enough education as to how the election was carried out and the procedures that took place? Because there was confusion, because when it came to council votes, voided votes, invalid votes, voter discrepancy, and the card reader failures, many people thought that it was well packaged, that even though the card reader failed, there would be an alternative.
Yes.
But we saw in the outcome at the end of the day that all those who were defaulted were enfranchised eventually, even though their names, one way or the other, were still on the list. PVC collection frustrations. There were so many that couldn't pick up their PVCs at the end of the day. And the elongated, cumbersome, tiresome collation process. Now, I know it's not exactly INEC's fault that the electoral bill was not passed, but I think we should stop at nothing this time around to ensure that Nigeria does not repeat this 18th century approach towards elections. I mean, this is 2019, but the next time we vote is going to be
No, the next time we vote is next week, actually, for
no,
governorship.
no, they can't change
not-
that
it's
now.
not
They
over
can't
yet.
change that in this exercise.
Right.
But after now, with from May 29th, when they bring in the new government, we must. It's not something that we'll wait until the last minute
Yes.
and start claiming it can't happen. These apologies must be tendered.
Thank you, Dipo. Well
All right,
said.
Divo, we'll take some messages right now. Don't forget you can send your messages to our WhatsApp platform and, of course, on Twitter. We have this one here from WhatsApp. Congratulations to Nigerians who stood up for Nigeria. We stood against falsehood fueled by Thisday. Goes on to say, but thank you very much for your comment.
Please add your names to your messages so we can take them.
Shola here says, my issue is why Atiku can't just divide the North. The Kardashian aside, in quotes, Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Kebbi, and genocide them far. Oh, there's a new one. And Sokoto. What happened to the other states? He couldn't even do his job. That's Peter delivered fully.
Sometimes that's how elections pan out. We have this one from Harmony. He says the killings have been going on and nothing has been done. Tell me, Val, if your relatives are involved in this serial intentional killings, will you continue to wait for the government, who seems to be less concerned about the people's security? I will shout my loudest voice. And Oluzil says, Kajuru, welcome to Hertzman 2.0. Create a spurious argument, depopulate area, rename it, repeat action. There's a militia in Nigeria, he says, numbering 400, and we're still no closer to the solution. And we have more messages from Regina.
Regina says, Kaduna has always been volatile. The shared disunity between the two religious groups who make up Kaduna North and South is the reason for this recurring violence. Sadly, it will happen again. You know why? The issue is at the root.
It's actually more ethnic than religious.
Yes. So let's move on to the next story from the Vanguard newspaper. Adedunmade, this one's for you. Saudi Arabia invests $100 billion in India, threatens Nigeria's oil exports. So Saudi Arabia has concluded plans to invest $100 billion in India, Nigeria's major oil importer, thus threatening the future importation for the country. We see that oil and gas really has been pegged and added to the used to beef up the budget, and it really is very instrumental to our nation's economy and the growth of it thereof. But what does this say now in the coming days?
Basically, the use of oil world over, or the sale of oil world over, has been attacked by so many factors. Now, in Nigeria particularly, we have told ourselves as a country that we want to be able to bring in more investment into our oil industry and also to be able to secure more markets for ourselves. But it's sad that this is something we've not been able to do. For instance, I see no reason why Saudi Arabia should not be coming to Nigeria with this $100 billion. I believe that
You see no reason why?
Yeah, no, what I meant is, we are the ones that should be benefiting from this, actually, not India. But because our government has not placed us in the rightful position, to be able to handle such investment and also to be able to increase our capacity, then that's why we are falling short to people like India. And it is not just India, there are so many other countries that are overtaking us in the attraction of FDI. Look at Kenya, look at even our next neighbor, Ghana. Now, there's something with the international oil companies, the IOC. They've been trying to work since last year, since like the end of last year, towards August and October, and they've been saying so many things about how they want to do this, how they want to do that, but we've seen so far that they've not been able to actually put their plans into reality. All we just keep talking about is planning, and there's a major problem which stems from the legal ecosystem that surrounds oil in Nigeria. Now, we know that there are a number of laws that are yet to be passed. We know about the PIB and other laws. I think there are about 5 of them that come out of the PIB. Those have not been passed. So our government has not put us in a place to take advantage of any such inflows. We are not in any way attracting FDI. So I just wonder if we should just continue like this. Well, like Ms. Ireti said, next level of shit.
Like somebody said on WhatsApp, is day one for the next 4 years.
All right, we'll go on to our next story. We have a number of comments coming in. We will try to read as much as possible during the course of the show. If we don't get to all of them, during Lagos Talks later on today, we will be speaking about the elections robustly. So please stay tuned for that at 9 a.m. But right now, we move on to our next story. We're dragging the GOC, that's the General Officer Commanding 6th Division, to the International Criminal Court. Now, this is from the Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike. Just a few details around that story. It's one against the other, and Wike has been accused by the GOC of trying to compromise soldiers of the 6th Division during the election, and now Wike has turned around to saying that indeed the GOC has stolen electoral materials and he's going to take him to the International Criminal Court. Ms. Ireti, what's your take on this?
Not a lot. As he said, he's not guilty, which is what he's going to maintain. And he said, in spite of the recording that was actually shown this morning on television, in spite of his telephone recording, doesn't believe he's done anything wrong.
And so he's taken. What do you think that he's lost confidence in the courts of the country, and that's why he's taking it, or taking it forward to the International Criminal Court? And what has the International Criminal Court had to do with election malpractice? Is it because it has to do with the military, or he's just?
Adedunmade, you're the lawyer.
Sorry?
What does it?
So what, ICC,
I was
why
actually
take it to
trying
the
to pay
ICC?
attention to my next
To your
story.
next story, no,
Yeah.
we'll come into that. But ICC is being dragged into this by Wike. Do you think they have jurisdiction over this case, or do you think he's just, trying to pull his weight, saying, I'm going to show you guys?
Well, I know that the ICC has a lot of weight as it relates particularly to war crimes. So is this a war crime?
Well,
That's going to be the
this
first
same
question I'm going to ask.
government has not really paid particular attention to external jurisdictions upon our sovereignty. So I don't really expect much. There are pending cases that we're all well aware of.
All right, okay. Moving away from that, we go on to road crashes. Now, this is a report. The FRSC have released this report in their monthly bulletin, stating just a detail of what's happened in the month of December. Worrying figures here: road crashes, 682 die across Nigeria in December. This is from the Premium Times. We see stories here, we hear about them, we read about them. What do you have to say about this?
Well, in the usual fashion, the FRC does output the statistics on road crashes and fatalities.
Yeah.
And in this case, there was an increase to about 46% across. That's about 3,900 people injured in about 1,000 plus roads. Now, at the end of the day, they explained the different routes that were quite dangerous, with the highest number of accidents coming from Kaduna. But I want to bring...
No, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was actually identified as the road with the highest number of casualties. And I know a number of...
No, here it states Kaduna.
Yes, analysis based on crash-prone routes identified...
Okay, crash-prone routes, yes.
Road
Okay.
as the route with the highest occurrence of road crashes in the
Right.
month.
Now, this also brings to fore the issue of safety and awareness, and also enforcement, because the FRSC is vested not only to coordinate, but as well to enforce this alongside the police. Now, and it also begs the questions of do we have the best infrastructure at the end of the day to support an improved road system? And these are the issues, hopefully, that we expect the new regime to be able to deal with, not just for the sake of safety and preventing our deaths. Roads are the key to economic development. As most people say, how do we get out of the quagmire of our socio-economic degradation or conundrum?
Yeah.
The first thing the colonial masters did when they came into these areas was to build roads, because roads equate to access, and access equates to people's ability from the rural to the metropolitan zones, capacity to trade, capacity to raise your economic position forward. And in trying to do this, you should not be dying. So we're looking forward and hoping that the social amenities, the infrastructure that many have direly hoped for, they will get it in the next 4 years as much as possible.
Please, I have a question.
Yes, please.
When do we start learning lessons? When do we have to wait until it affects our family before we now decide to look at reality in the face? Because we've been talking about this. There are major problems with maintenance. There are major problems with people not being held accountable. People make promises. We have the Minister of Transportation works, and we have Minister of Works and Housing.
Yes.
They make promises. They give deadlines, and then they come back and retract that deadline and give. When do we start seeing things work, and who is going to be held responsible?
Well, cause and effect. This questions the age-old question in terms of the, let me not say African or the black man, the Nigerian man. Do we really take our lives serious in terms of the actions that we need to take to be able to deliver these results? 1 + 1 is equal to 2. It is not hope. It is not imaginary. When you elect officials, government officials, you need to maintain the assignment up until the last day. It doesn't end with the elections. What we have in our history is that after the elections, we go to bed, and then we start complaining at the next election. How come?
4 years time,
Yes, we need to, on a daily basis, hold these officials accountable for the promises that they have declared.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on, we're talking about promises and looking at infrastructure and institutions. Let's go to the education sector. Now, here in the new Telegraph, we have stakeholders divided over new mass communication curriculum. Now, the attention is placed on mass communication, but I think it tends to a wider look at the courses offered in our universities and the educational system as a whole. So, summary of the story, they're trying to revamp the curriculum, and in doing this they want to break down the mass communication department to have it as journalism and media studies, public relations, advertising, broadcasting, film and multimedia, and a few other smaller units like that. Ms. Ireti, now the big question is, a number of people have talked about the overhaul of the education system. A number of people have talked about the government paying more attention to education in Nigeria, and not just the mass communication but even other courses. Do you think many of them are, should possibly be looking at a revamp or a restructure, or looking at the quality of the courses that we offer in our institutions?
How about fixing the education system first instead of looking at changing anything?
All right, and with regards to fixing, is there anything in particular the government, Buhari is going for a second term now, we know that he has a Minister of Education, is there anything in particular that they should be focusing on, particularly in our universities and colleges?
I'm sorry, I just didn't know there was. I just wanted to be sure.
And that's why we're asking the question. Perhaps he's listening and he might take 1 or 2 points from our discussion.
Listen, he's
The list is
celebrating.
endless. The list is endless. Pick whichever part of the education system. You have a deteriorating system that's been deteriorating for decades.
Collapsed.
Fix one, exactly, collapse. So
Okay, so we'll still be, our eyes are still on that story, and we're giving you an update on what the conclusion is. But like we mentioned, it's not just for mass communication, different courses across universities in Nigeria. We'll take a few comments before we go into our other stories.
MI from Akoka says, congratulations to Mr. Buhari. At least it gives closure to stakeholders on macroeconomic levels and will inform business decisions. I wish I had a degree in law, not economics, because the legal luminaries will surely have a litany of litigations on their hands at next level.
Adedunmade, are you ready?
Election petition, yes.
Right. Tribunal, hey? Taj says, I hope that now the elections are over, all the hate speech and patriotic rhetorics would stop. The elections are not over. We'll have governorship elections for next weekend. Ibrahim says, good morning, Smith. I'm glad about the return of PMB. Talking about the ballot papers in a number of parties. Senegal is just about concluding their elections, and they only have about 5 candidates. Why can't we such apply to us? INEC really needs to renew its electoral act. Samuel from Lekki says, the election has shown how so divided the country has become. Whatever happens, I hope the next level will bring unity and fairness, unlike what we saw in the change agenda. Buhari should not repeat the 97.5 statement.
Good morning. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think maybe that's a discussion we need to have on another day. The number of parties on the ballot box. Shippers Council raises the alarm over attacks on Nigeria's waterways from Thisday newspaper. Adedunmade, this is coming to you. Now, just a summary, targeted 88 times in 1 year by pirates. But the focus I'd like us to look at here this morning is the anti-piracy bill and the passage into law. What's happening with that?
You know, first of all, I also like to say that there is a global maritime report that states that out of the 45 reported cases of piracy in the world, 22 actually came from Nigeria. That is about 49%,
Wow.
which is very alarming and which is what should call our attention. Now, this has continued for some time, not just 1 year or 2 years, it has continued, and industry experts have continued to call for passage of the anti-piracy bill. In fact, NIMASA was one of the agencies who was championing this aggressively, if I might say, and even went ahead to create a draft bill which was forwarded to the president and hopefully will now be forwarded to the National Assembly. Now, sometime in December 2017, the Federal Executive Council passed a memo that yes, the draft bill should be forwarded to the National Assembly for what I'll call evaluation, so that they can take a robust look at it, see if there needs to be any amendments and eventually pass it into law. But sadly, about 14 months after that memo was passed, we're still here asking the president to pass this bill on to the National Assembly. Now, the essence of this bill is actually to domesticate the United Nations law on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and a couple of other conventions. Now, the thing with UN conventions is if you don't domesticate them in Nigeria, then they don't come into effect. So now that the president has finished campaigning and he has been reported that he has won the election, I suggest that he now starts to do the work as it relates to the anti-piracy bill, because there is so much the country needs and the president. Then there's one more thing. I've always said that the Navy cannot do this work alone.
Okay.
They need to have another agency. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Another agency, more money. All right, NAQS opposes NAFDAC'c's ban on methyl bromide. That's the Nigeria Agricultural Quarantine Service. It's currently a loggerhead to the national, NAFDAC'c over NAFDAC'c's recent ban on the use of methyl bromide. Now, just to give a background on that story, studies have shown that the lung may be severely injured by anti-bromide, acute short-term inhalation, and in 2005 it was banned in the US except for use that qualify for quarantine and pre-shipment purposes. So largely NAFDAC'c have banned methyl bromide as used in agriculture. What's your take on this, Ms. Ireti?
No chemicals should be in our agriculture.
All right, so agreeing with the stance on NAFDAC'c, with
Pardon?
NAFDACC stance.
Well, there shouldn't be any chemical in our agriculture. That's part of why half of America is so fat.
Yeah,
Because of genetically modified food. So we can't control chemicals once, but it's true.
You're right. I mean, genetically modified
you can't
organisms.
control
No,
once
but this is
once
not a
you're
genetically
yeah, but it
modified.
doesn't matter. Once you have chemical in your agriculture anyway, you can't control what happens, and nobody knows what's going to happen actually, because it goes on for generations after generations until somebody in the country where we can't even sit down and allow the only person that voted for next level to actually get a chance to scream next level. I doubt we'll actually have time to be able to investigate when methyl bromide starts killing people.
Well, it's
Well,
more about
also-
regulation, which is NAQS's
Actually-
point of view.
No,
Yes, there is a purpose for it when it's controlled.
There was also a purpose for nuclear until it started killing people. Nuclear.
Power without control is chaos.
But
It
that's
is.
the point. The point is that in a country where we can't even control tiny, smaller, we can't even decide what the voting process should be. You really seriously think that we should be allowing? In fact, half the country can't even pronounce this methyl bromide in our agricultural system.
Well, the new National Assembly, I hope they weigh in on it and see whether they can come to some. Because these are two agencies
If we
within
live
the
our
same
lives
ministry
to those
that are
people,
loggerheads.
if we live our lives to those people who we begrudgingly, granted, vote for and they go in there,
Well,
then half of us would actually be
I'm not
handicapped.
sure the polity agrees with you. Many people voted with their hearts and minds. So
Well,
let's
no,
see.
I'm all about next level. As you know, I'm probably the only person in here, and I stuck by it throughout. Okay, and I will repeat it again. Like they're telling me on Twitter, don't mind their misery, the rest of your colleagues are upset. Tough. But I am saying to you that if we allow, what happens when you allow chemicals into your agricultural system? Is that it gets, you can't control it anymore. Once it's in there, and then it sort of grows wings and goes all over the place. And then once the formalities start happening, who's going to stop it?
Next level regulators.
Thanks, people. I like that.
We thank you very much for your messages. We thank you for your comments and observations. We will be taking more of your messages inside of Lagos Talks 91, where we have an extensive conversation on these issues. Ms. Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, thank you for stepping in at CCOG Lagos. Find out on Twitter at that handle. And as Divo Korea is at Divo Korea, Adedunmade is at Adedunmade. Lagos, in the next 14 minutes, we talk sports inside of the locker room. Keep listening to Smooth 98.1.